My mother-in-law, Eleanor Vance, handed me divorce papers at my own 10th anniversary party, expecting me to shatter. In front of 300 of the city's elite, she presented them in a Tiffany blue box as if it were a precious gift. But she didn't get the tears she craved. She didn't get the begging she so desperately wanted to see. Instead, I looked her right in her cold, triumphant eyes, smiled, and said, "Thank you." Our story began like a fairy tale, or at least, that's what Julian wanted to believe. We met in college. He was the heir to the Vance real estate empire, a golden boy with a charming smile and a shadow that wasn't entirely his own. I was just Ava, a quiet art history major on a scholarship, someone who preferred libraries to galas. He said he loved that about me. He said my calm was the anchor in his chaotic world, a world dominated by his mother, Eleanor. Eleanor Vance was not a woman, she was a weather system. From our first meeting, she made her disapproval a palpable force in any room we shared. My clothes were never the right designer. My family, which I vaguely described as being in private investments back home, was deemed insignificant. My very presence was an insult to the Vance legacy. For 10 years, I endured it. I learned to smile through thinly veiled insults at dinner parties, to nod politely when she redecorated our home without my consent, and to absorb the endless criticism she funneled through her son. "You're nothing. You've always been nothing," she'd once sneered at me in a quiet moment, some poor little nobody who got lucky and trapped my son. The most cutting blows, however, were not always verbal. I remembered the spring gala, 2 years into my marriage. I had spent months curating a small, deeply personal exhibition of emerging local artists, a passion project I poured my soul into. Eleanor had feigned support, even offering the Vance Gallery space for the opening night. I was so naive then. The night before the event, she'd called, her voice saccharine sweet. "Darling, a slight change of plans. Julian's annual charity auction needed the main gallery last minute. Your little display will be quite charming in the coat check room. Don't worry, people will still see it." My little display was relegated to a dimly lit alcove next to racks of fur coats, forgotten amidst the clamor of the main event. When I confronted her, heartbroken, she simply smiled. "Oh, Ava, you're just so sensitive. Julian's work is simply more impactful. You must learn your place, dear." It wasn't just about the art, it was about crushing any flicker of independent ambition, a constant reminder that my value was only ever derived from Julian. Julian, my dear Julian, was the perpetual buffer and, ultimately, the enabler. "That's just how she is, Ava," he'd plead after every cruel remark. "She means well, she's just protective." He would smooth things over with expensive gifts and promises of a vacation, his apologies always tasting like a confession of his own weakness. He loved me, I think, in the way a man can love a beautiful, comfortable idea. But he feared his mother more. I used to believe that love could conquer anything. That if I were just patient enough, kind enough, and strong enough, Julian would eventually stand up and choose me. Choose us. For a decade, I built our life on that fragile hope. I hosted his charity dinners, I supported his business ventures, I gave up my own career aspirations to be the perfect corporate wife. I played the part so well that I think even I started to forget the woman I was before I became Mrs. Julian Vance. The planning for our 10th anniversary party was Eleanor's magnum opus of control. It was to be held at the Grand Majestic Hotel, a Vance-owned property, of course. She oversaw every detail, from the ice sculptures carved into the Vance family crest to the specific vintage of champagne that would be served. I was merely a prop for her grand production. "Smile, dear," she'd command during the planning meetings. "You should look grateful." Julian just squeezed my hand under the table, his silent apology a familiar weight. 3 months before the party, the final illusion of my marriage crumbled. I was in the library of their estate, searching for a book, when I heard their voices from the adjoining study. The door was slightly ajar. Eleanor's tone was low and sharp, like the edge of a razor. "It has to be public, Julian. A clean, decisive break. We can't have this little charity case dragging the family name through a messy divorce for years." There was a pause. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs, praying for my husband to defend me. To defend us. "She's been a good wife, Mother," he said, his voice weak, hesitant. "A good wife? She's been a placeholder. A decade is long enough. The prenup is ironclad, she'll get her pittance and be gone. We'll do it at the anniversary party." The height of irony. "It'll be a clean cut, and the narrative will be in our control." I waited, my entire world narrowing to the space in that doorway, to the sound of my husband's response. I could hear him sigh, a long, weary sound of surrender. Then he uttered the 7 words that sealed his fate: "If you think it's best, Mother." I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream or throw things or confront them. The pain was too cold, too deep for that. It was a perfect, crystalline shard of betrayal that pierced right through me. I slipped out of the library, my movements silent and precise. Instead of going to our bedroom, I went to the guest suite, locked the door, and I made a phone call. "Dad?" I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my soul. "It's time." On the other end of the line, Robert Sterling, the reclusive titan of global logistics and a man the Van Sass had never bothered to Google, listened patiently. He wanted to destroy them immediately, publicly, painfully. But I convinced him to let me handle it my way. I didn't want their ruin to be a gift from my father, I wanted it to be a consequence delivered by me. For the next 90 days, I lived a double life that was both exhilarating and exhausting. My nights were spent in a temporary war room set up in a discreet Sterling Group penthouse, miles from the Vance estate. My father's most trusted advisors were there: Evelyn Chin, a corporate acquisitions shark with eyes like flint, and David Thorne, a legal strategist whose reputation for finding loopholes was legendary. "The Vance Corporation isn't as liquid as they project," Evelyn explained, pointing to complex financial charts projected onto the wall. "Eleanor's vanity projects, the new downtown tower, the boutique hotel chain, they're heavily leveraged. We can acquire the debt. Not directly, of course. A dozen shell corporations, cycling through offshore accounts, buying up promissory notes from various lenders. By the time they realize their creditors have changed, it will be too late to unwind." I listened intently, asking incisive questions, pushing for weaknesses, identifying pressure points. "What about their key suppliers? The ones they rely on for everyday operations, maintenance contracts, their technology providers?" I tapped a finger on the screen. "Control the capillaries, and you control the heart. Make sure we have the leverage to call in those lines of credit, to disrupt their supply chains without warning." The strategist looked at me, not as Julian Vance's quiet wife, but as Ava Sterling, a force in her own right. My father had trained me well, not just in art history, but in the art of war. The silence in the room was heavy with the magnitude of our undertaking, a silent financial coup designed to dismantle an empire brick by painstaking brick. One evening, deep into the planning, I was alone in the study, reviewing a stack of sensitive documents outlining the acquisition of Vance's primary legal firm. The light was dim, the only sound the soft click of my laptop keys. Suddenly, I heard Julian's footsteps approaching, closer than they should have been. Panic flared. The screen instantly locked, but a thick folder of acquisition papers lay open on the desk. I snatched them, barely managing to shove them under a pile of fashion magazines just as he poked his head in. "Ava? Still up?" he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. He swayed slightly, no doubt having had a late-night drink. "Couldn't sleep. Thought you might be in here. Just looking for a good book, I lied, my heart thumping against my ribs. I forced a yawn, rubbing my eyes. This party planning is exhausting. My head spinning with seating arrangements. I gestured vaguely at the magazines. He chuckled, oblivious. Tell me about it. Mother's got everyone on edge. He walked over, leaning against the desk, inches from where the folder lay hidden. Come on to bed, love. You look like you're about to collapse. He kissed my forehead, and I recoiled imperceptibly from his touch, the smell of his cologne suddenly cloying. I quickly gathered the magazines, the hidden documents rustling beneath them, and forced a weary smile. Lead the way, I said, my voice a fraction too bright, wondering how long I could keep up this elaborate, suffocating charade. My friend Clara called me a week before the party. She was one of the few people who saw past the polite facade, though she never truly understood the depths of my entrapment. Ava, are you okay? Really? You sound brittle. Like you're holding a breath you've been holding for a decade. I walked to the kitchen, away from Julian who was on a call in the living room. Just party planning stress, I lied smoothly, forcing a laugh I didn't feel. You know how Eleanor gets. She practically designed my dress and expects me to be thrilled about it. That woman, Clara sighed, her voice laced with genuine pity. Honestly, Ava, how do you do it? 10 years of that relentless barrage. You're a saint, truly. I don't know anyone else who could withstand it. She always treated you like a pet project, didn't she? Something to be molded, but never truly accepted. Doesn't that just eat at you? Her questions were sharper than usual, her concern piercing my carefully constructed armor. The pity felt like a hot poker against my skin, a reminder of the weak, enduring victim everyone saw, the role I had been forced to play. It's just how things are, I said, trying to inject a note of weary acceptance into my tone. You learn to compartmentalize. And Julian, he tries, you know? He's caught in the middle. Is he? Clara countered, her voice softening but her skepticism palpable. Or is he just good at letting her fight his battles? Ava, you deserve so much more than this. This life where you're constantly shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. Has Julian ever truly stood up for you? Really stood up? The truth of her words hung in the air, a silent indictment. I could only manage a noncommittal hum, my throat tight. They had no idea the reckoning that was coming, that I wasn't shrinking anymore, but expanding. The night of the party arrived. The ballroom of the Grand Majestic was breathtaking, a sea of shimmering gowns and black ties. I stood beside Julian, my arm linked through his, wearing a simple, elegant black dress that Eleanor had called funereal when she saw the sketch. Julian was a mess of nerves, constantly adjusting his tie and downing champagne, avoiding my gaze like I was a dangerous phantom. He knew what was coming, just not how. At precisely 9 o'clock, Eleanor tapped a champagne flute with a silver spoon, silencing the orchestra. A hush fell over the crowd. She took the stage, a smug, predatory smile on her face, bathed in the soft glow of the spotlights. Thank you all for coming to celebrate 10 years of Julian and Ava's marriage, she began, her pause before my name a deliberate, calculated insult, meant to diminish me. A decade is a significant milestone. A time for reflection. A time for new beginnings. She beckoned a waiter forward, who was holding a velvet tray. On it sat the familiar Tiffany blue box. My heart was a cold, steady drum, each beat a silent countdown. This was it. She walked towards me, her steps full of theatrical purpose, relishing every moment of her grand performance. The cameras from the society pages flashed, capturing the moment for eternity. Happy anniversary, dear," she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. She handed me the box. "You're free now. Free to go back to wherever you came from." I took the box. My hands were steady, betraying none of the tremor in my soul. I opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of satin, were the divorce papers Julian had already signed, his signature a clumsy scrawl betraying his guilt. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, a wave of shock spreading through the elegant room. I looked up from the papers and met Eleanor's gaze. She was waiting for the explosion, for the humiliation to bloom on my face, for me to shatter before her and all her guests. And that's when I smiled. It wasn't a small, polite smile. It was a wide, genuine, and utterly terrifying smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Thank you, Eleanor," I said, my voice clear and calm, echoing slightly in the sudden silence. "You have no idea how much I've been looking forward to this. I think you've made a terrible mistake." The confusion that washed over her face was the most satisfying thing I had seen in 10 years. The crowd began to murmur, the scene not playing out according to the script they had all anticipated. Julian looked pale, as if he was about to be sick. "What is this? What's wrong with you?" Eleanor hissed, her composure cracking, her eyes narrowed with dawning fury. "Why aren't you crying? Why aren't you begging?" "Begging?" I let out a soft laugh, a sound cold and brittle. "Oh, Eleanor. Why would I beg? You've just handed me the perfect anniversary gift." I turned to face the stunned guests, letting my gaze sweep across the sea of bewildered faces. Eleanor is right. Tonight is about new beginnings. But not just for me. I walked to the microphone on the stage, the divorce papers held loosely in my hand, a flimsy prop in a play far grander than she had imagined. The room was so quiet you could hear the clinking of ice in abandoned glasses. Julian tried to grab my arm, his fingers brushing mine. "Ava, don't." I pulled away from him, my touch like ice, a chasm already forming between us. "For 10 years, I have been Ava Vance," I began, my voice ringing through the ballroom, gaining strength with every word. "The quiet wife. The woman from nowhere. The one who was never quite good enough for this family." I paused, letting the words hang in the air, allowing their weight to settle on the stunned audience. I let you all believe that. I let her believe that. I pointed a single, steady finger at Eleanor, who now stood frozen in disbelief. For a fleeting second, a wave of doubt washed over me. The sheer scale of what I was about to do felt monstrous, the destruction I had meticulously orchestrated. I could see the confusion and fear on the faces in the crowd, people who had only ever known me as a silent accessory, a placid backdrop to the Vance dynasty. Was this justice, or was it just cruelty wearing a different mask? Then I saw Julian hiding behind his mother, his eyes pleading with me to stop, to go back to being the quiet, manageable wife who would absorb their toxicity and ask for nothing. And in that moment, the doubt vanished. They built this stage. They provided the audience. I was just delivering the final act, ensuring they would never again have the power to inflict this kind of pain on anyone else. You see, my mother-in-law has always been obsessed with names, with legacy, with power. The Vance name, she believes, is a shield that makes her untouchable. I let a beat of silence pass, the tension in the room almost unbearable. But what Eleanor doesn't know is that while she was busy playing queen in her little kingdom, my family was busy buying it. A tremor went through the room. Eleanor's face went from confused to furious, her eyes now blazing with impotent rage. "What nonsense are you talking about? You're delusional." "Security," she shrieked, gesturing wildly towards the doors. "Don't bother," I said calmly, my voice cutting through her desperate outburst. "They work for me now. As of 6 p.m. this evening, the Sterling Group completed its acquisition of the Grand Majestic's parent hospitality company. I ticked the points off on my fingers, each statement a hammer blow. I also own the holding company that holds the debt for the new Vance Tower downtown. A debt, I might add, that is due in full on Monday morning. And I own the catering company that provided tonight's food. And the valet service. And the security firm that guards this very building. I paused, letting my words sink in. Game over, Eleanor. The house always wins. I let my gaze sweep over the room before it landed back on her, a mask of disbelief now etched onto her features, her perfect makeup unable to hide the pallor spreading beneath. My mistake, I said softly, almost kindly. You see, you don't know my name. You never bothered to ask. My name is Ava Sterling. The name landed like a bomb, ripping through the carefully constructed facade of the Vance Empire. Robert Sterling was a legend, a ghost who moved markets and built empires from the shadows. His name was whispered with fearing reverence in circles far above the Vances. To be his daughter, it was impossible. You're lying, Eleanor spat, her voice a raw, desperate shriek. Am I? I asked, a faint smile playing on my lips. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. The massive display behind the stage, which had been showing a slideshow of my 10 years with Julian, flickered to life. It now showed a series of legal documents, deeds, and stock certificates, each one bearing the Sterling Group logo. The final image was a complex flowchart showing every single Vance asset, from their real estate holdings to their private jet, all now subsidiaries of Sterling. I own your house, Eleanor. I own your car. I own the law firm that drafted this very convenient prenuptial agreement. I turned my attention to Julian. He was staring at me, his mouth agape, his face a ghostly white, as if seeing me for the very first time. And you, Julian, I said, my voice softening with a decade of repressed pain and weary disappointment. You let this happen. You watched your mother abuse me, humiliate me, break me down piece by piece, and you said nothing. You stood in that study and you agreed to destroy me publicly for her convenience, for her ego. You didn't choose me. You chose her. So now, you can have her. I walked off the stage and approached Eleanor, who was now trembling with a rage so profound it left her speechless, her face contorted beyond recognition. You wanted me gone? I whispered, for her ears only, leaning in close. Congratulations. You're getting your wish. I'm leaving. But I'm taking everything with me. I'll sue you. I'll destroy you, she seethed, finally finding her voice, a venomous whisper. Try it, Eleanor, I replied, my voice a silken threat that promised swift, crushing retaliation. I own your lawyers, too. I walked out of that ballroom without looking back. I didn't need to see the fallout. I could feel the shockwaves behind me, the complete and utter implosion of the Vance dynasty. I didn't feel triumph, not yet. Just a vast, cold, and quiet emptiness where a decade of my life used to be. The whispers of the crowd, the frantic calls, Eleanor's raw, broken cries, they were merely background noise to the silence that had finally settled within me. The aftermath was exactly as I had planned it. The Vance Empire was swiftly and legally dismantled, its assets efficiently absorbed into the Sterling Group. Eleanor and Julian were left with a small trust fund I had magnanimously allowed them to keep, enough to live on, but not enough to wield any power. The tabloids had a field day, painting me as either a vengeful goddess or a black widow, a ruthless corporate predator. I didn't care. Their opinions were irrelevant. The narrative was mine. A month later, Julian showed up at the temporary penthouse I was living in, a lavish but impersonal space overlooking Central Park. He looked smaller, diminished, his usual polished veneer replaced by a worn, desperate earnestness. He tried to apologize, to explain. He spoke of his mother's suffocating influence, his own crippling fear of her, his weakness, a self-awareness that was both shocking and infuriatingly late. "I know I messed up, Ava," he said, his voice raw, his eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic hope. He ran a hand through his perpetually neat hair, now slightly disheveled. "I've been seeing someone, a therapist. Trying to untangle myself from her. To understand why I couldn't stand up, why I was so afraid. It was never about not loving you, Ava. It was about surviving her. I was weak, I know. A coward. But maybe we can fix this. Start over, away from her. I'm different now." He took a step closer, reaching out a hesitant hand. I looked at his outstretched hand, then into his pleading eyes. His confession was genuine, I believed that. The man before me was a shadow of the entitled golden boy, broken and vulnerable. But the damage he had allowed, the silence he had kept, had carved a chasm too deep to bridge. "No, Julian," I said, not with anger, but with a profound, weary finality that left no room for negotiation. "We can't. You broke something that can never be repaired. That's the truth you have to live with. And I have to live with it, too." I closed the door on his face, gently but firmly, and on that chapter of my life. The man I had loved for a decade was gone, replaced by a stranger who had finally found his voice, but far too late to matter. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. I didn't just want justice, I wanted to annihilate them. I wanted Eleanor to feel the same powerlessness she had inflicted on me for 10 years. Does that make me as cruel as her? Perhaps. But then I remembered the cold silence in my heart when I heard Julian say, "If you think it's best, Mother." And I know I did what I had to do. I didn't destroy her. I just took away her ability to destroy anyone else. The best revenge isn't becoming a monster. It's simply taking the board away so they can't play anymore. Today, I stand in the boardroom of Sterling Industries, a company I am now positioned to lead. The view of the city is vast and clear, a panorama of my new world. Down below, somewhere in a quiet, respectable suburb, Eleanor Vance lives in a modest house she does not own. She has no staff, no galas, no power. She is, for the first time in her life, simply a woman, stripped of the name and the money she used as a weapon. Julian, I hear, is still in therapy, still trying to find his own voice, truly independent for the first time. Some might call what I did revenge. I call it a market correction. People should be wary of the quiet woman in the corner, the one they dismiss and underestimate. Because sometimes that quiet woman is a billionaire playing chess while you're still playing checkers. By the time you realize the game has changed, it's already checkmate.